Hi guys. I've put together this presentation and it's going to help you really prepare for your assessment task when it comes to studying for Module B, which we know is called a close study of text. And we know that that text we are studying is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, written by Mark Haddon. The next few minutes, I just really want to focus on looking at the syllabus, looking at the rubric, key ideas found within the rubric. I also want to look at our assessment task, and then finally I want to end it by looking at what your focus is by studying this unit. Okay, so let's start with the syllabus overview. So this module requires students to engage in detailed analysis of a text. My understanding of what I've taught my class, when it comes to the word analysis, just think of it as staying inside of the text. So, of course, that goes hand in hand with the fact that this module is a close study of a text. So you're really looking at all of the features, all of the distinctive features and characteristics found within a text, and you're studying them very closely to then extract what is the meaning behind this text and how can it really challenge our world in which we reside in. So it develops students' understanding of how the ideas, forms, and language of a text interact within the text and may affect those responding to it. In other words, how do these three components of a text work together to then affect the reader? Now, this is a very important thing to remember. There is a purpose and a reason as to why composers write novels. They are trying to achieve some sort of goal. And usually that goal is, how can I challenge the world and its inhabitants? And in order to do that effectively, you actually have to create an emotional response from the reader. So you'll find that this book in particular is a great example of how composers are challenging our world, challenging our ideologies by affecting us through the ideas, forms, and language. So each elective of this, in this module involves a close study of a single text. So there are no related text involved, just one simple text. Students engage with the text to respond both imaginatively, effectively, again we know that means emotionally, and critically. Now the word critically is really important to remember because that is what distinguishes, say, an A paper from, say, a C paper. And it's your ability to then step outside of the text and then to evaluate why this text was written and what meaning we can take from it. So how is it, applying to our real world, in other words? They explore, you explore and analyze particular characteristics of the text, considering how these shape meaning. They also consider the ways in which these characteristics establish the text's distinctive qualities. Now we know that this particular text is very distinctive in how it is formatted, how it's laid out, and how it is brought to the reader. Very different from your normal narrative style. And that goes again hand in hand with the composer's main message, which we know centers around this notion of difference. Composition focuses on meaning shaped in and through the text. These compositions may be realized in a variety of forms and media. So what does this mean for us? So you need to produce a conceptual and critical response for this module using the scene question. Your essay needs to unpack a text and evaluate how the composer uses certain literary devices, whether they be techniques, form, and features, to again affect the reader. And we know that that is to create an emotional response from the reader. Additionally, you need to examine the role of literary devices in creating meaning within a text. So there's three things that you need to remember here is A, is what features has Mark Haddon chosen or deliberately picked to B, affect his readers, and C, make a statement, create meaning, challenge, and to apply it to the real world. So those are the three things that you need to really remember. So you need to ask yourself these 5 questions, and these 5 questions will then help you to train your brain to think both conceptually and critically. So the first question is why do composers create text? They don't just write them because they're good writers. They write them for a purpose, for a really, really important meaning. Look at some of the texts, the most classic novels in the world. Why are they classics? No, like, for instance, To Kill a Mockingbird. Why was that particular text so important and integral to humanity? It really did change a lot of things. So that's why people write text. It's not just because it's a source of entertainment, but also because it can really challenge our world and how we perceive our world and others. Number two is, how do composers use form, features, and literary techniques to create meaning and create an emotional response? Thirdly, what is the meaning behind the text? Again, that goes hand in hand with number one. So why have they written this text? And I've taught my students that, composers use their novels as a tangible tool to challenge and comment on the world and its inhabitants. The fourth question is, what can we learn about our world and its inhabitants from reading this text? And lastly, what can we learn about ourselves from reading and studying this text? And again, I've really told my students that this novel in particular is as much about us as it is about Christopher. It always reflects back onto us and our own treatment of difference. So those are the 5 questions that you really need to hone in on when it comes to being able to think both conceptually and critically about a text. Okay, so the rubric key ideas. Now, it is really important that you use the rubric to shape your response because, of course, this assessment task that you'll be completing in week 1 is seen, but for the trial and for the actual HSC, you will not be given the question beforehand. So you need to make sure that you know that rubric, you know those key terminology, the key words and the terminology and the meta language used in the rubric, because it will be those words that they then use to mold and to construct a question. So in other words, you will never receive a question that is not based entirely on the rubric. So you need to really make sure that you familiarise yourself with that rubric. As Module B requires you to study closely the novel of The Curious Incident, you need to ensure that you have a thorough understanding of all aspects of the novel. That means you need to know this text inside and out, essentially. The rubric suggests that following key ideas which represent deep learning, and that's a fancy word that us teachers use for both critical and conceptual thinking. Now you'll see that these 2 words are reappearing, and that is because they're really important. And as I said, it's these 2 things that are going to really distinguish an A paper from a C paper. It's your ability to think conceptually, and it's your ability to then compare this text to the real world. So these are the 3 important parts of the rubric that you really need to consider. So the first one being construction. How meaning is shaped and conveyed through the interaction in the novel of, or in terms of ideas. So the personal and intellectual connection we have with a novel through the thoughts and conceptual understanding that are provoked. Form. Now we know that this particular novel is written in the form of prose, which is really important for how Mark Haddon creates meaning and affects the reader and so forth, and also the structure of the novel. Language, the words, images, dialogue, and conventions that communicate meaning. So those are the real 3 things that you need to focus on in your responses. How is this text constructed? How are the ideas and the form and the language working together to achieve one common goal? Whether that be to simply create a message or to affect the reader, maybe both. Positioning. How a reader is affected by the novel's textual details and features and positioned to respond. Very, very important for your rich evaluation, this one. So positioning refers to the reader. How is this text or how is this chapter making the reader feel? Is this feeling so strong that the reader then feels as though they need to act upon it? They then question and challenge their own world. Essentially, in my opinion, that is the sole purpose as to why composers make texts, and that is to create a response that can then challenge the world. Textual integrity. How the unified characteristics of a text establish its distinctive features, and we know that this novel is very, very distinctive when it comes to its features and how it's presented to the reader, how it's laid out, how it is formatted. Again, all these 3 things work hand in hand to create one common goal, and this again is your focus. Assessment. So you've got 2 assessments for this module. The first one, of course, will be your trial and your actual HSC, and that is here. you can see that the paper 2, section 2 of the HSC English exam for standards. So in that assessment, you'll have to write a formal response to a set question. And as I said, that question will not be seen. So you need to make sure that, again, you are very familiar with the rubric. Number 2, which you will be completing the first week back of school, is your assessment task. And again, a formal response to a seen question. Assessment task is a critical response. So I just want to focus on what you're going to be doing in the first week back. So you will be completing this assessment task on Thursday, the 21st of July, and it is worth 10% of your overall grade. Now, don't be underwhelmed by that. I know it's a very low figure and a very low percentage of your overall grade. However, this essay, if you receive an A for this, that means you have a solid piece of work to then use in this one here. So this is all designed to set you up and make sure you are prepared for this big one here. Okay, so context is you're going to be completing it in class time. An examination of Module B is a close study of text. Students explored, so this is just going through what you have done and showing that you are prepared for this actual task. And it's saying that students explored Mark Haddon's text and developed a critical response to the text and how it conveys the issues relevant to Haddon's novel. See here, again, emphasis on the outside world. How you can then compare this text to the outside world. Always be aware of that, okay? So students explored key conceptual ideas and examined text structure and a range of language devices. So we know we've looked at the concepts, truth, perceptions, relationships. We've looked at the text structure, the prime numbers, how the text is characterized, language devices, techniques, all that sort of thing. So you guys are well prepared. It's now just a matter of consolidating your knowledge to make sure that you are 100% confident for this task. So the description of the task is, you know what it is. You need to write a detailed response to this question here. So the question being, how does Haddon's portrayal of Christopher help us, aka the reader, to understand the importance of acceptance? So from reading this text, how are readers then positioned to challenge themselves and the world that they live in? How is their understanding of acceptance enhanced? Okay, so that's essentially the basis of your question. Your response should evaluate the composer's distinctive use of forms and features to provide insight into unique perspective being, of course, Christopher. You will be given 40 minutes writing time to complete your response under assessment conditions. Guys, make sure that you are practicing writing under exam conditions, because it doesn't matter if you come up with the most amazing response, and then you cannot write it within that time frame, you're going to be screwed. So you need to make sure that you can actually write under pressured, stressed, and examination conditions that are timed, of course. You will also be completing this assessment task in period 4 on Thursday. And again, like I said, that is the first week back at school. Make sure you are prepared, okay? Now, I'm probably not going to have enough time to just quickly run through this, but this is something I've shown you before. But now that I've got the opportunity to really verbalize it and go through it with you, I'm going to do a separate clip for this one because it's very important as it looks at what we're studying and what you guys need to focus on. It just refines everything I've just talked about, essentially. So guys, I'm going to upload this one now, and then can you stay tuned, and I'll be uploading another video that looks at the focus of the unit. Thank you.